My sister always bragged she was the smartest one in the family, the golden lawyer with brains and charm. She loved reminding me I was just a builder with a hammer, but she had no idea I was about to flip the script. When she stole the one thing I worked hardest for, she thought I'd crumble. Instead, I built something she could never imagine, and on the day she finally saw it, her face was worth every drop of sweat. If you've ever felt underestimated by someone close, this story will hit home. Stick around, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps bring more powerful stories of revenge and redemption to life. My name is Kylie Edwards. I'm 33 years old, a structural engineer, living and working in Chicago, and I've spent most of my life trying to measure up to a sister who made sure I'd never feel good enough. Her name is Madison, the star of the family, the one everyone praised since she was little. Madison had a perfect straight-A record. She went to an Ivy League law school, and she could hold an entire courtroom in the palm of her hand with that silver tongue of hers. Me, I was the kid who loved to build things. I took apart my dad's tools before I could ride a bike, sketching blueprints in my notebooks instead of practicing spelling bees. I didn't want to argue a case in front of a jury. I wanted to design bridges that lasted 100 years, buildings that would stand against the toughest winds. But no one in the family really understood what that meant, except to say I was good with my hands, like a construction worker. Mom and Dad would beam with pride every time Madison brought home another trophy or award, praising her sharp mind, her logic, her confidence. They'd talk for hours about how she was going to change the world as a brilliant lawyer. And then they'd look at me with a polite little smile, asking if I'd made any birdhouses lately. It burned, but I kept my mouth shut. I kept working, studying, getting licensed, proving myself in a field where so few women even tried to break through. Madison, of course, never missed a chance to remind me I was beneath her. Family gatherings were the worst. She'd laugh at my clothes, roll her eyes at my dull career, and make little jokes about how I'd never be able to keep up with the real world. It didn't matter how many certifications I earned or how respected I was at my engineering firm. Madison had decided I was the dumb one, and she stuck to that script like gospel. I'd learned to grit my teeth and let it roll off my back, but inside a fire was always burning. I worked on huge projects around Chicago Hospital, renovations, bridges, even some of the tallest condos downtown. But in my family's eyes, Madison still held the crown. They'd toast to her courtroom wins, while I was lucky to get a nod for doing something with buildings. About a year ago, my parents decided they were going to sell the old family house on the south side. It was the place we'd grown up, a worn-down brick house with a sagging porch and memories in every crack of its foundation. The neighborhood had changed so much. New investors were sniffing around. Developers were buying up entire blocks. I saw a chance I could buy it myself, restore it, maybe even convert the lot into something beautiful for the community. It felt right taking what had shaped me and reshaping it for a new chapter. I was ready to put in an offer, my savings, my sweat, my knowledge of city codes. But before I even finished lining up the paperwork, Madison swooped in. She made sure she heard about my plan first, and then used her connections to get the property out from under me. She even bragged about how she'd snapped it up before I could make a mess of things, as if I hadn't been designing blueprints for some of the city's biggest developers for almost a decade. When she told me what she'd done, there was a cold triumph in her voice. She laughed and said, "You never think ahead, Kylie. That's the problem. I'm always 2 steps ahead of you." That sentence hit harder than a punch. I'd spent my entire life being told I wasn't clever enough. And now she'd proven it by stealing the one place I wanted to rebuild with my own hands. For weeks, I barely slept. My mind raced every night, replaying her smirk, her patronizing tone, the smug victory. I felt like my chest was caving in. Madison had stolen not just a property, but my dream. And no one in my family even seemed to care. They just congratulated her on another smart investment. But as crushed as I was, something shifted inside me. I'd been knocked down before. I'd faced arrogant contractors, sexist bosses, impossible deadlines. This was personal. But it wasn't the end. If Madison thought she'd beaten me, she had no idea who she was dealing with. I decided I wasn't going to let her define me one more time. I was going to rise, even if I had to build the entire plan from scratch. Madison loved playing games, setting the rules, thinking she was the only smart one. Fine. I would play, but on a whole new level. That's when I started talking to a well-known architect I'd worked with on a hospital project, a genius with a taste for community renewal. Together, we started scoping out other properties, looking at city maps, reviewing zoning codes. There was a piece of land a few blocks from the family house, neglected, overgrown, considered worthless by most developers. But I saw potential. I saw a chance to build something far bigger than just a house. And so I rolled up my sleeves, sharpened my focus, and made a promise to myself. Madison was about to learn just how smart her little sister really was. The moment Madison closed on the family house, she acted like she'd won a trophy. She hosted a big family dinner that weekend, almost as if to rub it in. The old brick house was still exactly as it had been creaking. Floorboards, faded wallpaper, and that smell of memories clinging to the hallways. But Madison strolled around like she was queen of a castle, giving orders to painters and plumbers, while everyone else admired her vision. I tried to stay calm, to keep my composure. It was just a building, I told myself. But deep down, it was so much more than that. It was every scraped knee, every birthday candle, every family argument echoing in those walls. Madison didn't care about any of that. To her, it was a bragging right, another feather in her legal eagle cap. During dinner, she made sure the entire family heard how she had rescued the house from me. I couldn't stand by and watch Kylie waste her money on a rundown place she announced between bites of roast chicken. She means well, but she doesn't have the head for property. I do. Mom laughed along. Dad nodded proudly. Even my cousins seemed to agree. I just sat there, hands clenched so tightly my knuckles turned white. It wasn't that I couldn't stand losing the house, though that hurt like hell. What burned me alive was the way she humiliated me in front of everyone, reducing my entire career to nothing with one smug smile. The next week, Madison started renovations. She didn't even bother to call me about it, though I'd offered to help with the structural assessments. Instead, she brought in a cut-rate contractor who slapped together the cheapest fixes, ignoring long-term damage to the foundation. I watched in horror as workers ripped out old beams without reinforcing the walls, patched up the roof with thin plywood, and ignored clear water damage in the basement. Madison strutted around in designer heels, telling everyone the place would be stunning once she flipped it. It was like a bad dream. She'd stolen my project and was actively destroying it, turning what should have been a careful, meaningful rebuild into a cheap money grab. And yet people still called her brilliant. One night, as I was heading home from a site inspection downtown Madison, called me out of nowhere. "Hey, Kylie," she chirped. "Thought you should know. I'm going to list the house for double what I paid." Smart, right? Her voice practically dripped with condescension. "You think you'll get that much?" I asked, trying to stay neutral. "Oh, I know I will. Don't worry, little sis, you'll learn how real deals are made one day." She hung up before I could even reply. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, staring at the dashboard, letting her words sink in. The rage was boiling. I had worked for years to build a reputation as a skilled engineer, someone who valued quality, safety, and community. And here was Madison trashing everything I cared about, then bragging about it to my face. The worst part, everyone seemed to believe her. Friends, neighbors, even some of my extended family acted like Madison was the savior of the block. They didn't see the shortcuts, the sloppy materials, the corners she was cutting. All they saw was a confident lawyer with money and style. I went to bed that night with a hollow pit in my stomach. I felt powerless, like a little girl again, being laughed at for trying to build something out of Lego blocks, while Madison showed off her spelling bee trophies. But I wasn't a little girl anymore. The next morning, I drove past a vacant lot on Maple Street. It was a mesh chain-link fence falling over weeds taller than me, a few stray cats wandering around. But in my mind, I saw more. I saw a multi-unit apartment complex, modern, sustainable, affordable, something that would lift the neighborhood instead of exploiting it. That night, I opened my laptop, pulled out every city zoning map I'd ever saved, and started sketching. My heart was still bruised from Madison's betrayal, but my mind was clearer than ever. If she wanted to play dirty, I'd play smart. A few days later, I went back to the family house. Madison was there bossing around the contractor. I stepped inside, ducking under half-finished beams, and saw disaster waiting to happen. "Kylie," she said, in that syrupy tone, "here to check out my progress." "Your foundation's slipping," I told her, pointing to a cracked support wall. "You need to fix that before you go any further." "Oh, please," she waved me off, rolling her eyes. "I have professionals for that." I bit my tongue, so hard I tasted blood. Fine, I thought. Let her do it her way. Later that week, I filed a quiet request for a building permit on the Maple Street lot, naming myself lead structural engineer and design consultant. I also reached out to Marcus, an architect who was a legend in green community design. We'd worked together before, and he trusted my skills. When I showed him my plans, he grinned. "This could change the neighborhood," he said. "That's the idea," I replied. Every night after work, I'd go home, flip open my laptop, and run calculations until my eyes burned. I barely ate, barely slept, but I was on fire with purpose. Meanwhile, Madison strutted through her doomed project like a peacock. She threw launch parties, bragged to the press, even scheduled an open house before construction was finished. She was so sure she'd outsmarted me again. But she didn't realize I was done playing by her rules. She thought she'd humiliated me for the last time. I was about to show her exactly what a builder with a hammer could do. As the weeks passed, Madison's so-called masterpiece started showing cracks, literally. Neighbors began complaining about leaks. The new paint on the front porch peeled within days. Rumors spread that she'd skipped inspections to save money paying off a shady inspector to look the other way. But Madison didn't care. She'd already listed the house online with glossy photoshopped images and a ridiculous price tag. To her, perception was everything. Truth was optional. I tried to warn my parents gently, hinting that the house might not be safe. They wouldn't hear it. "Madison knows what she's doing," Dad insisted. "She's a lawyer, Kylie. She's smart." That word smart sliced through me every time. Madison was smart. I was, the one with dirt under her nails. I swallowed my pride, but it burned like acid. Meanwhile, I kept grinding away on my own dream. The Maple Street project consumed every second of my life. I worked full-time at my engineering firm, then spent nights finalizing site plans, chasing permits, coordinating with Marcus, and tracking down investors. I had to fight twice as hard to be taken seriously. A woman engineer pitching a multi-unit green housing development wasn't exactly the kind of thing banks lined up to fund. Every rejection made me doubt myself. Maybe Madison was right. Maybe I wasn't smart enough. Maybe this was too big. But then I'd look at her shoddy construction job, her lazy shortcuts, her fake smile, and the rage would relight my fire. If she could pull together a sloppy deal and still get praised for it, there was no way I was going to back down from doing something real. Marcus and I hustled every contact we knew. Finally, a local community development fund saw our plans and decided to gamble on us. They liked our vision for affordable, sustainable housing and the way it could raise up a neglected neighborhood. The funding was a fraction of what a luxury condo investor might throw down, but to me, it was gold. I signed the contract with trembling hands, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. This was my shot, one shot to prove I wasn't just a girl with a hammer. Meanwhile, Madison ramped up her campaign of humiliation. She invited the entire family to a preview party at the half-finished house. Against my better judgment, I went. Maybe some tiny piece of me still wanted her approval, even after everything. The place was a mess. There was drywall dust on the floor, the plumbing barely working, and exposed wires in the kitchen. Madison waltzed around in a cocktail dress and stiletto heels, giving a tour like she was showing off a penthouse. "Isn't it gorgeous?" she beamed, tossing her hair back. "Much better than any silly community project, wouldn't you say?" "Kylie." I bit down hard, refusing to answer. "No comment." "Come on, don't be shy," she pushed loud enough for a dozen guests to hear. "I told you some people just don't have a head for business." The guests laughed politely, and my stomach turned. I slipped away to the backyard, staring at the cracked foundation Madison had ignored. A chill went through me as I realized someone could get hurt in this place, a child, a family. But Madison wouldn't listen. She was too far gone in her own ego. When I left that night, my entire body felt like a block of ice. Madison had stolen my dream, twisted it into a vanity project, and used it to mock me in front of everyone. For the first time in years, I genuinely wanted to see her fail. Not out of spite, but so she'd finally learn that real work, real integrity, could never be faked. Back at my apartment, I collapsed on the couch, letting exhaustion wash over me. There were moments I wanted to quit, moments I wanted to run away from Chicago altogether. But I couldn't, because if I did, Madison would win. So I poured every ounce of energy into Maple Street. Marcus and I broke ground 2 weeks later, clearing weeds, stabilizing the soil, and setting the first structural beams. It was hard work, sweaty, gritty, thankless. But each day, I watched something rise where there had only been decay. In a twisted way, Madison was my fuel. Every cruel remark, every snide joke, every fake smile pushed me harder. Then came the day the local paper picked up our project. They ran a feature story on how a woman engineer and a visionary architect were working to bring sustainable housing to a forgotten neighborhood. My phone rang off the hook. Old college friends, colleagues, even strangers wanting to volunteer or donate. Madison saw it too. She called me that night. "Kylie," she snapped, no warmth in her voice. "I saw that article. Don't get ahead of yourself. You're still going to lose." For the first time, I laughed. "You know, Madison." I told her, "I think you're scared." She hung up. That night, I slept like a baby. The next few weeks felt like living in two parallel worlds. On one side, I was knee-deep in the Maple Street project, overseeing concrete pours, inspecting steel reinforcements, making sure every inch was built to last. I worked until my muscles ached and my hands blistered, but it was a kind of pain that made me feel alive because it had purpose. On the other side, there was Madison. Her flip was falling apart before it was even finished. The quick-fix plumbing she'd installed started backing up, flooding the basement. Her patchwork roof began to sag under an early spring storm. Neighbors filed complaints about unsafe scaffolding. But Madison kept pretending everything was fine. She took glossy selfies in front of the half-finished house, posting them with captions like, "Girl boss, dream home." It was grotesque the way she clung to the illusion. One afternoon, I drove past the family house on my way to the Maple Street site. Madison happened to be outside yelling at a plumber who was trying to fix a burst pipe. She spotted me and stomped over hair-flying rage in her eyes. "Did you spread rumors about my project, Kylie?" she hissed, ignoring the mud splattering her expensive shoes. "No," I answered calmly. "Your mistakes are speaking for themselves." Her nostrils flared. "You think you're so clever, don't you? With your little charity build? This house is worth more than that entire block of apartments you're putting up." I took a long look at her cracked siding, waterlogged foundation, and the exhausted workers ready to walk off the job. "Maybe on paper," I said, "but some things can't be measured in dollars." She scoffed, waving me away like a piece of trash. "You'll see," she snapped. "You'll see when you fail, just like you always do." Her voice echoed in my head for days. At the Maple Street site, Marcus noticed how tense I was. "You okay?" he asked while we checked the rebar cages. "Yeah," I lied. "Just tired." But Marcus could read me too well. "Look," he said, "you're not just building apartments here, Kylie. You're building a legacy. Let her dig her own grave." I nodded, trying to believe him. The tension kept building. The night before Madison's big open house, a rumor hit the local Facebook groups that her place had failed a city safety inspection. Madison's face went white when she read it. She immediately called me, voice shaking with rage. "You sabotaged me," she screamed. "No," I told her, keeping my tone steady. "You did that all on your own." She cursed and hung up on me, leaving me trembling, half from fear, half from adrenaline. The next day, she went ahead with the open house anyway, desperate to save face. She brought in a fancy staging company to throw furniture over the warped floors and light candles to hide the damp smell. Dozens of people showed up thanks to her PR campaign. I couldn't stay away. I had to see it for myself. When I arrived, I found the place jam-packed with realtors and gawking neighbors. Madison was smiling, holding a flute of champagne, acting like a queen on her throne. But when she saw me by the doorway, her eyes narrowed. "Came to gloat," she snapped under her breath. "Just observing," I replied. Half an hour later, it happened. A potential buyer leaned against a poorly reinforced banister, and the whole thing gave way, sending him crashing to the floor below. Screams filled the house. Madison went pale. I rushed forward, helping the man up, checking for injuries. Thankfully, he was shaken, but okay. But the damage was done. Word spread instantly. Her fancy open house had turned into a safety nightmare. Madison tried to recover, but the city inspector was right behind. He'd shown up for a surprise check and saw the collapse happen with his own eyes. "Shut this site down," he ordered, voice cold. Immediately. Madison started crying. Real, uncontrolled sobs right there in front of everyone. I felt a strange mix of pity and vindication. I had tried to warn her. I had tried to help. But she wouldn't listen. And now the consequences had arrived full force. She caught my eye, cheeks wet with tears. "Are you happy now?" she choked out. "No," I said honestly. "I wish you'd listened." I left her standing there, surrounded by gawking neighbors and shamed to the bone. Back at Maple Street, it felt like stepping into another universe. The site was alive with progress workers laying bricks with care kids from the neighborhood peeking in to see what was coming. People thanking us for giving them hope. One older woman stopped me by the fence. "You're the one behind this, aren't you?" she asked. "Yeah," I nodded shyly. "God bless you," she said, squeezing my hand. "We needed this." I nearly cried right there in my hard hat and steel-toed boots. All my years of feeling second best, all the times I'd been called less smart, washed away in that moment. That night, I stood on the future rooftop of the Maple Street building. The city, lights glittering around me, and took a deep breath. Madison's world was crashing down while mine was finally rising brick by brick, beam by beam. And for once, I didn't have to prove anything to anyone. My work was the proof. The collapse at Madison's open house had sent a shockwave through the neighborhood. Within a day, word spread, like wildfire, the perfect lawyer with her perfect house flip had nearly gotten someone killed because she'd cut every corner in the book. The city shut down her permits, flagged the structure as unsafe, and slapped a giant red notice on the front door that made everyone think twice before going near it. Madison tried to spin the story, of course. She blamed the contractor, the inspector, even the weather. But nobody was buying it anymore. Her friends stopped calling. Her social media followers turned on her. Even my parents, who had once sung her praises every day of my childhood, started questioning everything. "How could this happen, Maddie?" Dad asked her in one hushed conversation I overheard. "It wasn't my fault," she hissed back, but her voice cracked. For the first time, I saw Madison without her armor. She looked small. Not the invincible sister I'd battled my whole life. Not the flawless genius. Just a scared woman who had bet everything on a lie and lost, and I should have felt sorry for her. And part of me did. But a bigger part of me knew that she had done this to herself, and that I'd spent far too many years paying the price for her insecurities. While her disaster unfolded, the Maple Street project was taking flight. Word about what Marcus and I were building spread through the neighborhood. Volunteers showed up after work to help paint. Local kids asked if they could plant flowers around the property. Community groups donated books and supplies for a shared learning space on the ground floor. The whole thing became bigger than me, exactly what I'd hoped for. It wasn't just about buildings. It was about pride, hope, and second chances. One Saturday, I got a call from the Community Development Fund we'd partnered with. They wanted to bring in the mayor to do a ribbon-cutting ceremony. I almost dropped my phone. The mayor. Suddenly, this was real, on a level I'd never dreamed. When the day arrived, the mayor stood on a small stage we built out of salvaged wood, surrounded by kids with balloons and families smiling wide. She talked about the power of local investment, about women in engineering, about giving back to the neighborhoods that raised us. And then she handed me the microphone. I was shaking. I looked out at the crowd people I'd grown up with. People who'd doubted me. People who'd laughed at me behind my back. And in that moment, I felt something shift in my chest. "I know some of you never thought I could do this." I began, voice cracking just a little. And to be honest, there were days I didn't think I could either. But this isn't about me. It's about us. About proving that where we come from doesn't have to define where we're going. The cheers made my eyes well up with tears. They told me I wasn't smart enough. I continued. But smart doesn't always mean you talk the loudest. Smart can mean you build something that lasts, something that lifts everyone up, not just yourself. The mayor shook my hand, and cameras flashed all around us. In the corner of the crowd, I saw Madison. She was standing by herself. No fanfare, no champagne, no spotlight, just silent watching me. Our eyes locked for a second, and I saw all the hurt and jealousy that had fueled her for years. I also saw fear that I'd finally surpassed her. After the ceremony, she approached me, hesitating before she spoke. "Kylie," she started, voice thin. "Can we talk?" Part of me wanted to walk away, but I stayed put. "What is it, Madison?" I asked. She took a deep breath, fighting tears. "I don't know how you did this," she whispered. I thought I'd always be ahead." I sighed, feeling years of resentment bubbling up. "Madison, you tried to beat me by tearing things down," I told her. "I built something up. That's the difference." Her shoulders slumped. "I ruined everything," she admitted, voice cracking. "I can't fix that house. No one will even talk to me about buying it now." For a second, I felt my heart soften. That was still my sister. The sister who once braided my hair before my first day of school. The sister who protected me from bullies on the playground. Somewhere along the way, we'd both been poisoned by our parents' endless comparisons. "Madison," I said gently, "if you want help fixing the foundation, I can connect you with real structural engineers, but you have to do it right this time." She looked at me like I'd offered her water in the desert. "You'd help me?" she stammered. "I'll advise you," I clarified, "because I don't want anyone to get hurt." She nodded, shame washing over her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for everything." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was a start. A week later, I watched a wrecking crew tear down half of Madison's flip house so they could rebuild it properly. It felt symbolic, like her whole ego project had to crumble before she could learn how to do things the right way. Meanwhile, my Maple Street building opened to its first tenants. Families moved in carrying boxes and dreams. Kids raced down the hallway laughing. The local news did a story about a hometown girl who brought affordable housing to the South Side. That night, after everyone left, I walked through the quiet halls. I ran my hand over the smooth walls, felt the solid beams, smelled the fresh paint. Every inch of that building had my sweat and tears in it, and every inch proved that I was more than what Madison or anyone had ever believed about me. I stepped outside, taking in the evening air, and saw Madison standing on the sidewalk. She'd come to see the place again, maybe to torture herself, maybe to learn. "It's beautiful," she admitted softly. "It's strong," I corrected. She nodded. "I guess I never knew how strong you really were." I gave her a sad smile. "I've always been strong," I said. "You just never bothered to see it." She looked away, swallowing hard. "Maybe I didn't want to," she admitted. "Maybe I was scared." "Scared of me?" I asked. "Scared of being less," she confessed. We stood there awkward and quiet, two sisters who'd torn each other down for years. But for the first time, there was honesty between us. "You're not less," I told her, "but you have to stop trying to make me less too." She nodded, wiping at her eyes. "Deal," she whispered. For the first time in my life, I believed she meant it. As she walked away, I turned back to the Maple Street apartments. The lights were shining through every window. Families were safe inside. And for once, I felt completely at peace. This was my revenge. Not destroying Madison, but rising so far above her games that she could never drag me down again. The grand opening of Maple Street marked more than just the completion of a building. It marked the rebirth of who I was. Watching families settle in laughing and hopeful reminded me of everything I dreamed about since I was a little girl, sketching bridges in my notebook. Madison came by one more time a week later. She was quieter now, humbled but somehow softer too. She walked through the community garden. The residents had already started planting, marveling at the colorful flowers and the laughter of children playing in the courtyard. "They're going to have good lives here," she said, almost in awe. That was the point, I answered. She nodded, finally, understanding something she'd never grasped before. That true greatness isn't measured by winning over others, but by lifting people up. As the sun set behind the rooftops, the golden light made the building glow, a symbol of second chances and resilience. I took a deep breath, feeling every hardship and humiliation fall away. In that moment, I didn't feel small or overlooked. I felt powerful, respected, free. Madison took a shaky breath. "You're not just a builder," she told me. "You're an architect of hope." I smiled, and for the first time, it felt genuine between us. "Thanks, Madison," I replied, "but I think we both can learn to build better." She nodded, and we stood there, side by side, no longer enemies, but sisters who had finally found a fragile peace. As I turned back to the apartment block, I knew one thing for sure. I had won, not by destroying Madison, but by showing her and everyone else what it meant to be truly strong. In the end, I built more than walls. I built a future, and no one would ever take that from me again.